So the next student, who I decided his most distinctive quality for his project was how incredibly well-rounded it was between the three facets of electrical, computer science, and mechanical engineering. Compared to other projects, it's also by far the most intense soldering project, even outside of blue sampling I've seen in a while. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So the next person to go is Priam.
Hi. Hold on a sec. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Priam, and I'm a rising junior at Choate Rosemary Hall. So my project at Blue Stamp is called a MIDI controller, and I picked this project because I play guitar, which gave me sort of a personal connection to it with music, but also because this option had, in my opinion, the most opportunity for electrical, mechanical, and software engineering, which allowed me to get the much needed exposure that I desired. So short for a musical instrument digital interference, my project is sort of an array of buttons and potentiometers. For those who don't know what a potentiometer is, it's like a knob or a slider, which sets a different resistance depending on where the slider or the knob is placed. And that can change the pitch or the volume of the sounds. And so all of these buttons and knobs, they interface with GarageBand on my computer to produce sounds once a button's pressed. So I think it'll actually work. I have a backup video in case it doesn't, but share my screen to show GarageBand. Here it is. So there's not much to see here, but I'll tilt my screen down if you guys can still see me. And there's just an array of buttons right now. So all these like red light up things are buttons, and they're all soldered to a perf board. And the perf board connects everything to its individual pins. And then it also has ground and power to it. This was a lot of soldering, probably took me like a solid day and a little bit more than that. And so each time I press a button, a different sound comes out. And you can assign different sounds out, and so it's not working. So I'm going to share the video of it. We're still in the sort of debugging process because it's a lot of buttons. So here's a video of it. You guys can hear that, right? Oh yeah, that's basically what it is. I also, a little bit farther down, switched it to a drum kit. So you can just pick all sorts of sounds from GarageBand and sort of make your own music. And that's essentially what it does. So yeah, and then on top of that, I also used CAD, computer-aided design, to create an enclosure for this MIDI controller. And I will share the screen again to show you this. So this is the Fusion file. I used Autodesk Fusion, and I created this design. So that's where all the buttons would go, the 2 sliders and my 4 knobs. And that's where the microprocessor itself would sit right there, and then I could just plug it in from the back. So that's the enclosure. And so the microprocessor itself is programmed to sense any changes in the component state, whether a button's pressed or the knob's turned or the slider's moved, and that relays information to the computer, which transforms it to sound. And so the hardest part of this process was definitely the debugging of my code and setting up my computer in order to let the device communicate to GarageBand. There's actually this this program called Hairless MIDI. It's sort of like a middleman between the two. It helps convert the language which the Arduino talks to the computer. It changes it so that way it can talk to GarageBand. So it's sort of this translator. So it took me a while to find that online and figure out how to set it up. And then on top of that, I've never used Arduino before. So the debugging and going through the code was definitely a hard part of this. But I Let's see, if anything, I'll definitely try to add some LEDs to my case when it comes. Otherwise, the last step is definitely going to be just installing the project, because currently it's just a bunch of wires. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this you know entire experience. I really enjoyed the positive and inclusive class atmosphere, despite the unusual circumstances we're in. And I was also given amazing help from these instructors throughout the entire process. And so that's definitely what allowed me to learn. And now I have more experience in circuits than ever, and I'll build upon it with, in the coming years. So, yeah, thank you.
Nice. Cheers. Good job. Do you have any questions? I know your parents, do your parents have questions?
God.
No questions?
Priam, what would you want to add next?
Add next? That's a good question. There's not a lot of pins left on the Arduino itself, so I could sacrifice like a few buttons and then add, some fun lights, or I could do something to add onto the enclosure. I could add some other sort of, knob or button or something that does something else. Multiple channels. I don't know. There's a lot.
So it feeds into another question. If you started over, what would you do differently?
I'd probably design the enclosure before I figured out the software, because it's not coming. And I would have enjoyed having like a box to show you guys with all the stuff in it. It brought up a few problems, but regardless, it was still a really fun way to do it. So.
Okay.
I have a question, Priam.
Yeah.
Are you gonna finish it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe the enclosure box is on its way. Is that right, Ian?
It is.
Yeah.
It'll be there in probably a day or two.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I want to see it when it's finished.
Me too. All right. And if I've been counting correctly, I believe that's our last presenter. Is that right?
That is.
Okay.
Any other final questions from the parents
Yeah.
about anything?
Yeah. Anything about the program?